On the broadcast this Monday night, North Korea will continue carrying out nuclear weapons and submarine-launched ballistic missile tests next year. That's according to South Korea's defense ministry. We'll tell you why. Former main opposition party leader Ahn Cheol-soo's departure from party may spell trouble for the New Politics Alliance for Democracy ahead of a general election in April. Our parliamentary correspondent is live in the studio. And markets all across Asia slide amid sharpening worries about the stability of the junk bond market, tumbling oil prices, and as investors remain cautious before the highly anticipated Fed policy meeting this Tuesday. NewsCenter begins right now. Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to those around the world. Welcome to NewsCenter. North Korea is expected to continue carrying out nuclear as well as submarine ballistic missile launch tests next year. Now that's according to South Korea's defense ministry. Arirang News national defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin joins us from the defense ministry in Seoul. Hyun-bin, how did that assessment come about?
Well, according to the South Korean military says the broad cancellation of the Moranbong Band's concert in Beijing has strained the two countries' relations and could possibly lead to military provocations by the North. During a meeting of military commanders on Monday to evaluate all aspects of South Korea's military, including its improvements, a security assessment for North Korea emphasized the continued nuclear and ballistic missile threats the regime poses. The Ministry of National Defense responded, saying South Korea's military will retain its readiness to counter those possible threats.
The Ministry of National Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff will also maintain their joint readiness posture towards North Korea's nuclear testing and missile launches. South Korea will upgrade its anti-missile defense system under the South Korea-United States alliance.
Speaking in front of 150 generals and heads of defense-related government organizations, Defense Minister Han Min-gu emphasized that North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, displays a constant reign of terror, and that the South's military needs to stand fast against the communist regime's unpredictable military provocations.
The best way to counter enemy provocations is to abide by solid principles, which also restores public trust.
Han also emphasized that South Korea's military's unchanging value is to win wars under any circumstances. The ministry also says Korea plans to increase its counter-terrorism abilities next year to better guard against security threats from Pyongyang. This includes establishing a cyber defense research center to counter North Korea's growing cyber threats. Kon-young.
Indeed, readiness paramount to counter the possibility of North Korea conducting nuclear and missile tests in the near future. Thank you, Hyun-bin. That was our Kim Hyun-bin reporting from the Ministry of National Defense. The first high-level inter-Korean talks under President Park Geun-hye ended without an agreement over the weekend, not even a date set up to meet again. Well, it's left many wondering how that will impact cross-border relations here on the Korean Peninsula and whether there remains hope for another such meeting between the two Koreas in the near future. Arirang's Foreign Affairs correspondent Kwon So-ah reports.
Seoul's Unification Ministry has no specific plans yet to make contact for the next round of inter-Korean talks after negotiations broke down over the weekend. But Unification Minister Hong Yong-pyo said Monday that the government will continue its efforts to realize peace on the Korean peninsula step by step and leave the door open for further conversations. He added that it's difficult to solve all pending issues in one go. Nevertheless, concerns are rising that inter-Korean relations may take a downturn as expectations of a positive outcome or at least a date for the next meeting went unrealized. While some experts say the latest setback does not warrant pessimism, others believe it will at least take some time for the next encounter.
Even if the North wants to reopen talks in the near future, the South Korea-US joint military exercises will take place at the end of February or beginning of March next year. North Korea is likely to raise the issue of halting those drills, along with pushing for the reopening of the Mount Kumgang tourist resort. That will complicate matters, so I think the prospects are bleak.
The first vice ministerial level negotiations in 8 years that were held from Friday to Saturday were called off by the North Korean delegation as it felt that Seoul was reluctant to resume tours to the North's Mount Kumgang resort, a significant source of income for Pyongyang. Seoul pulled the plug on the tours in 2008 after a South Korean tourist was shot dead by a North Korean soldier. While South Korea focused mainly on regularizing reunions of families separated by the Korean War, Seoul made it clear that the two issues must be addressed independently. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Let's turn our focus to the nation's political scene, more specifically to the chaos engulfing Korea's main opposition party. Well, constantly at loggerheads with party leader Moon Jae-in, the NPAD's co-founder Ahn Cheol-soo says he has had enough. According to our Kim Ji-yeon, Ahn's departure may spark a moderate exodus of fellow members disillusioned with the direction the party is taking.
Following the footsteps of former opposition leader Ahn Cheol-soo, several New Politics Alliance for Democracy party members are expected to defect to join a new political party led by Ahn. Representative Moon Byung-ho, Ahn's former secretary, will announce his decision to defect on Tuesday. Moon has predicted that up to 10 NPAD lawmakers may follow suit next week, and as many as 30 NPAD members could desert the main opposition party by year's end. Ahn's defection from the NPAD party is widely seen as a precursor to his running for the presidency in 2017, after planning to change the political dominance from the current Conservative Party to a liberal one through April's general elections. The success of Ahn's plan to create a strong liberal party highly depends upon whether key political figures, including former NPAD co-chair Kim Han-gil, follow suit. Most of the possible deserters that have expressed support for Ahn, including Moon, Yoo Sung-yup, and Hwang Ju-hong, are considered outside of the NPAD mainstream. But if Ahn somehow succeeds in creating a new party, it's expected to change the competitive structure of the general elections, from the current single conservative Saenuri party against the liberal NPAD party to creating several liberal parties competing against the Saenuri party. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
For a more in-depth look into the looming shift in the political landscape ahead of April's general elections, our senior parliamentary correspondent Park Ji-won is live in the studio with me. Now, so Ji-won, as reported by our Kim Ji-yeon, a number of opposition lawmakers may follow Ahn out the NPAD door.
Yes, currently some 30 lawmakers are expected to leave the Liberal Party to join Ahn's new political movement. However, it's not yet clear when the departure will take place. Well, analysts are saying they will have to wait and see how the situation develops in the next few weeks. And as this graphic illustrates, there are three main pillars that comprises the main opposition party. One is the pro-former late President Roh Moo-hyun faction, represented by current leader Moon Jae-in, and another called a traditional former Democratic Party faction is mostly represented by members from South and North Jeolla province. And finally, a pro-Ahn faction, somewhat in the middle in terms of its political stance. Currently, the pro-no faction is leading the party, for which the other two factions have been resentful of. And lawmakers from these dissatisfied factions, such as 5-term lawmaker Chun Jung-bae and 3-term Park Ju-sun, both from the southwestern city of Gwangju, a stronghold of a former Democratic Party, have already left the party and announced their openness to joining Ahn Cheol-soo.
Right, Ji-won, let's talk more about Ahn's entry or journey into politics. Now, ever since, putting on the politician cap back in 2011, he's been no stranger to controversy surrounding, his decisions.
Yes, Kanya, the former IT expert and doctor has enjoyed popularity in the public since late 2000s as a successful role model for the nation's younger generations. Well, back then, he was viewed as a source of new hope for Korean voters tired of traditional party politics and once enjoyed the highest public approval ratings as the next presidential candidate. And let's take a look at some of Ahn's critical choices that have influenced and changed the political landscape of Korea's opposition bloc for the past few years, as well as his and now irrevocable relationship with the current main opposition leader, Moon Jae-in.
The former doctor turned software tycoon's first foray into politics was his run for Seoul City mayor back in 2011. Despite enjoying the highest public approval ratings, he conceded to Park Won-soon, another liberal candidate who went on to become the mayor. The following year, Ahn announced his candidacy for the presidency, but he again conceded after months of failed efforts to unite with another liberal presidential candidate, Moon Jae-in. Although Ahn's approval ratings were higher than those of Moon, Ahn dropped out of the race in an effort to defeat Park Geun-hye and the ruling Saenuri Party. However, since then, Ahn and Moon's relationship has soured. In 2013, he was elected as an independent lawmaker and created his new party in early 2014, but then merged the newly born party with the former Democratic Party to become a co-founder of the NPAD. In just 4 months of leading the party, he resigned from the post, taking responsibility for the failure of the July by-elections. Moon then held the reins of the Liberal Party since February this year. After another poor performance by the Liberal Party in this year's April by-elections, Ahn has been consistently vocal calling for a total renovation of the party, a proposal which Moon rejected. Finally, their relationship came to an end with Ahn announcing his departure from the party on Sunday.
Ji-won, do we expect Ahn's departure to impact the upcoming election results in April?
Well, as of now, experts remain divided over the issue, and some analysts even refuse to comment on the matter as of now, saying they need to see how the situation unfolds before making any predictions. However, most experts are of the belief that Ahn's departure will either benefit the ruling Conservative Party by weakening the Liberal camp, as Ahn could divide the Liberal vote, or it will deal a blow to the ruling camp. Let's take a listen.
In the short term, the ruling Saenuri Party will benefit from the situation, particularly in elections held in Seoul metropolitan areas, as many candidates are often elected by razor-thin margins. That's why the Saenuri Party is being very vocal in its criticism of the current situation, but I believe at heart they will be delighted.
I think it will ultimately work against the favor of the Saenuri Party, because it's highly likely that a new liberal party created by Ahn will receive a lot of media attention for their political agenda. This will naturally alienate the ruling Conservative Party from the media's focus. And if the new, small liberal blocs unite right before the general elections, they will make a great impact on the outcome.
And as you just heard, no doubt we will need to keep an eye on the situation to see how things develop.
Right. Another political drama we expect will play out leading up to the general elections in about 4 months' time. Thank you so much for that coverage, Ji-won.
Anytime.
Now, the Korean parliament has also failed to pass a handful of urgent bills during its regular session this year, and President Park is not happy about it. The Korean leader said the nation's lawmakers were engaged in politics not for the people, but for themselves. Song Ji-sun reports.
President Park Geun-hye on Mondays criticized the parliament for not doing its job and for only caring about their own party's interests. After meeting with chief secretaries, President Park said lawmakers are only concerned about their own good, not the public, and questioned why the National Assembly existed.
세계적으로 테러 위협이 커지고 있는 상황에서 테러 방지법조차 통과시키지 못한 것에 대해서 국회의 존재 이유를 묻지 않을 수 없습니다. 국회가 경제 활성화 법안과 국민의 생명 안전과 직결된 법안들에는 관심을 기울이지 않고 국민들의 삶과 동떨어진 내부 문제에만 매몰되고 있는 것은 국민과 민생을 외면하고 있는 것이나 다름없습니다.
Her remarks follow Ahn Cheol-soo's announcement on Sunday to withdraw from the opposition party, which led to dozens of lawmakers following suit and the likelihood of the launch of a separate party. Multiple bills on labor reforms as well as anti-terrorism failed to be passed this year, despite the president's repeated calls to expedite the process. Park reiterated the need to pass pending bills, stressing the importance of timing and warning that things could take even longer should this window of opportunity close. 송지선, Arirang News.
Now, the Asian financial market continues to fall as stock markets and currencies in this region dipped, continuing the trend from last week. Falling oil prices and a long-anticipated U.S. interest rate hike has left investors on edge. Our Kwon Jang-ho brings us the details.
The Asian stock markets tumbled again on Monday. The Japanese Nikkei index fell by 1.8%. The Hong Kong Hang Seng index was down 0.72%, and the Korean Kospi fell by 1.07%. It was a continuation of last Friday's sell-off, which marked the worst day for global equities since September. Only China stocks were up after weekend data showed China's factory output growth was at a 5-month high. But the Chinese yuan dropped for the 7th day in a row. The Korean won also suffered, ending the day 1,184.71 against the dollar, the lowest it has been since September. The continuing slide in the price of oil has been cited as one of the main reasons for Asia's markets being so rattled. US crude oil hit a 7-year low last Friday, and it has led to investors dropping risky assets in Asia for fears that the low oil prices signal weak global demand. Then there's the US Federal Reserve's meeting taking place on Tuesday and Wednesday. After months of uncertainty, it is now widely expected that the Fed will decide to raise the interest rate for the first time in nearly a decade, which spells bad news for Asia.
For countries in Asia, we can expect capital outflow and stock prices to drop, affecting their economies negatively. In Korea, capital outflow is likely to be less severe, but if other Asian countries suffer a downturn, Korean exports could suffer, and that would hurt the country's economy.
Over the next few days, all eyes will be on the Fed in the US, as it's likely to finally pull the trigger on the rate hike. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Korea's financial watchdog is set to introduce some changes in February, including tightened mortgage loan screening procedures for banks in Seoul. Measures that may be effective in curbing debt, but they could cause concern on a different front. Our Shin Se-min has the pros and cons of the detailed guidelines to tackle the country's ever-rising household debt.
Korea's financial regulator is taking a stab at the country's soaring housing debt, fueled by a string of government-led stimulus programs. The Financial Services Commission said starting next year, it'll tighten mortgage screening systems, assessing the borrower's ability to fully repay debt, unlike the current focus, which is more on whether they can repay interest. Applicants will be asked for additional data such as proof of regular income or spending, as well as credit card and insurance payment data, rather than just the value of owned collateral. The banks will also evaluate borrowing limits based on higher rates, keeping in mind the U.S. Federal Reserve is widely expected to boost its benchmark rate from near zero in its upcoming meeting. Higher rates in the U.S. have policymakers worried, as they could ultimately lead to higher borrowing costs in Korea, in turn hurting households that took out loans on the back of a record low base rate of 1.5%. Korea's household debt hit a fresh high at 1,166 trillion won, or some $980 billion as of the third quarter, a jump of 10% from a year earlier. But with the introduction of these new guidelines, some worry about the impact it'll have on the housing market once boosted by eased mortgage regulations.
The new guidelines are only focusing on mortgage-backed loans, while more than half of the loans are taken out for living costs, not to purchase houses. It could in turn dampen the country's housing market.
During the third quarter, home transactions spiked over 20% on year. The financial watchdog attributed the improved housing market to a rise in mortgage loans, with the amount of debt standing at nearly $544 billion in September. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
There There was relief and celebration in Paris over the weekend as officials from more than 190 countries swept aside monumental differences and agreed to an unprecedented global deal to tackle climate change, giving way to the historic accord known as the Paris Agreement. Though the plan was hailed as a milestone in the battle to keep Earth hospitable to human life, critics say it's short on specifics such as how the plan will be enforced and how improvements will be made. Well, joining us live in the studio to help us through is Chung So-young, Professor of International Studies at Korea University. Professor Chung, good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Now, you were in Paris yourself for the agreement. Tell us what the ambience was like, how the global leaders came about coming down with this agreement, and of course, what this agreement entails.
Well, everybody was there with a cautious optimism, backed by strong political will of head of states who gathered Paris to provide a strong support, political support to finish the long-time negotiation. And as a result, it's wonderful to have a new agreement which provides the new set of the rules to achieve the low-carbon economy to tackle climate change. So it was a very good moment for us to be there.
Right. So what kind of specific details does this agreement include?
It includes basically how countries can tackle climate change by achieving the low-carbon economy, meaning that the target how much they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, plus how they can actually achieve the low-carbon economy path by utilizing technologies and finances and capacity building on this. So it's a strong pack of the deals to achieve the grandeur, economic growth.
So it came as a whole package.
Exactly.
Now, what's seen as a problem or shortcomings by some critics is that it does not mandate exactly how much each country must cut down on its greenhouse gas emissions. Is that a problem in your view?
No, not at all. Simple comparison. Under the current second commitment on the Kyoto Protocol, which only covers the 15% of the total greenhouse gas emissions, and the Kyoto Protocol provides specific amount of the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by numbers. Whereas this new Paris Agreement entails so-called intended nationally determined contributions, meaning that voluntary contributions, how much you reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it covers 96% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Do you think which one would work better?
The latter, I suppose. Yeah. Well, another sticking point has been that, there is no way to punish those countries that don't do their part. And we're coming to learn that that was never on the table in the first place. Is this also worrisome or not?
Well, I think it's a right approach once again, that because we don't have a centralized government system in the world, so who can actually ensure the punishment? And the sovereign states don't want to be punished in any sense, and it's rather for them to encourage to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by themselves, and then providing some sort of guidelines. And look, this is a way of not only reducing greenhouse gas emissions, it's a way of growing your economy, and that's what countries agreed to participate in this agreement.
Right, and you mentioned in our pre-interview that, the way of my thinking is the traditional sense, and this is rather really a new approach to tackling climate change.
Exactly. So it's better for you to encourage the low carbon, green growth, meaning that reducing greenhouse gas emissions as a result of achieving the growth. So countries will welcome to have a chance to grow their economy. As a result, you can actually tackle climate change.
Right. So linking economic growth with low carbon emissions, how would you assess Korea's performance or Korea's participation in the creation and now enforcement of this new Paris Accord?
Right. There is a sort of mixed evaluation about Korea's performance in the negotiation, frankly speaking. But considering that Korea has very energy-intensive, industry infrastructure, then it's very difficult for Korea to reduce greenhouse gas emissions very much as some other countries which may not have, energy-intensive infrastructure. In the sense that Korea made its bold efforts to declare that it's going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 37% in year 2030 relative to the BAU level, which is still very ambitious goal for Korea to achieve.
Is it practical enough?
I think so, because Korea provides not only the plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 26% domestically, also Korea committed itself to utilize so-called international market mechanism by 11% reduction. So it has a combination of domestic and international efforts.
All right, let's hope that this will all work and we can really keep the global warming temperature within 2 degrees Celsius. Chung So-young, Professor of International Studies at Korea University, thank you indeed for coming in tonight and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.
Paris has got La Promenade Plantée, New York City the Highline Park, and now Seoul may have its own version of an old industrial infrastructure turned pedestrian-friendly gardens in the sky. It's not an especially new concept, but it's one that's proven hugely effective at revitalizing neighborhoods, which is why Seoul, along with cities like London and Houston, are jumping in this trend of building a greenway from an old elevated road. Greenway in the Seoul sky. Our news feature tonight with Lee Soon.
Clocks have just struck midnight and the Seoul Station overpass is now shut. Cars can no longer use the road. After 45 years in use, the overpass will be gradually transformed into a park for pedestrians.
Since its construction in 1970, the 914-meter-long overpass in front of Seoul Station has been a shortcut connecting 4 districts in central Seoul. But in 2006, the Seoul Station flyover received a failing grade of D on a safety test, prompting the Seoul metropolitan government to decide it would be best to demolish the road for the sake of safety and urban aesthetics. Then earlier this year in May, the city announced it will scrap demolition plans and instead remodel the road under the code name Seoul Station 7017 project. The 17-meter-high flyover, which had served the city's residents since 1970, will be transformed into a zone exclusive for pedestrians with 17 adjacent walkways by 2017.
If the city remodels the motorway instead of demolishing it, it will allow people to move around and perhaps turn it into an urban attraction. Recycling the structure is also more cost-effective than building a new one.
New York City's Highline Park is one instance of reusing an old urban structure. Once an abandoned railway, it was reborn into a park with flowers, trees, and benches. The urban regeneration project worked to prevent the city's deterioration.
There isn't much green space near Seoul Station, so we thought that if the overpass was converted into a park, people could enjoy it as a central urban attraction.
The city offered residents a chance to experience what the new green space would actually look and feel like by creating a temporary park on the road last May.
It'd be great if a park was made since the flyover failed the safety test anyways. The city will look much better.
Taxis need to move quickly. If we have to take a detour instead of the overpass, then obviously it's not good for us taxi drivers.
Another group of stakeholders not so happy with the project are those working at Namdaemun Market who have long used the motorway as an essential part of their lives, coming to work and making deliveries on this road.
Merchants need convenient traffic and distribution. We're against making a park on the Seoul Station flyover if no alternative road is to be built.
As opponents of the project predicted, roads were congested around Seoul Station during rush hour on the first Monday after the overpass was shut down. If an alternative road is not constructed, complaints from Namdaemun Market as well as from residents will only increase.
As a short-term solution, the city will make new bus lines and extend existing ones to encourage the use of public transportation instead of driving. In the long run, the only possible way of constructing an alternative road is on top of a railroad, so we'll hold talks with Korail to plan future constructions.
Seoul also operates a communication center where anyone with questions or opinions about the project can come and share their thoughts.
The Greenway Park, built in downtown Seoul, will create a more environmentally friendly urban landscape, allowing citizens to reclaim some space in the city. For the greater good, the city government is working to facilitate communication among the various stakeholders of the Seoul Station 7017 project. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
France's far-right National Front failed to win any seats in French regional elections. The loss was a major setback to party leader Marine Le Pen, who hopes to be a serious presidential contender in 2017. Bruce Harrison is live in the studio with me. Now, Bruce, why did the National Front come up empty-handed after so much support in the first round of voting?
Hello, Kang-young. Le Pen's party partly lost because its hard-right policies really isolate it from other parties, and that makes it really difficult to get votes needed to win major constituencies. For example, conservative candidates in this election picked up seats in some regions after socialist candidates pulled out to avoid splitting the vote.
Right, then why so much momentum in the first place then?
The National Front's been very tough on immigration and border control, so its support grew after the Paris attacks. Le Pen said support for her party's risen significantly since regional elections in 2010, and there's no stopping it. Now, analysts and citizens said the spike is largely a reaction to the attacks and does not run as deep as Le Pen indicated. They also blame poor job numbers under President Francois Hollande.
I am a bit disappointed in the mental spirit of the French people and their reaction to the events which happened to us in the last weeks. I would have thought that the population would react in a different way than run to extremists.
Former President Nicolas Sarkozy said politicians should take the far-right surge as a warning and discuss unemployment and immigration. Russia fired warning shots at a Turkish ship in the Aegean Sea. The two countries are already at serious odds after Turkey shot down a Russian military jet last month in Syria. Russia's defense ministry said one of the warships was forced to fire the warning shots Sunday to avoid colliding with the Turkish ship. The ministry said the Turkish fishing vessel only responded to the warship after the shots. Turkey said it's investigating Russia's claims.
Well, Bruce, both sides have said they want to really talk this out and solve the tension as, both Russia and Turkey are fighting a common enemy, the ISIS.
They've both said that. Both countries' foreign ministries have said that. But really, this latest incident is probably going to heighten tensions between Russia and Turkey. Russia recently slapped economic sanctions on Turkey for the jet being shot down, and there's been really no indication the two sides are going to sit down to talk this out anytime soon.
Well, let's hope for some de-escalation on that front through dialogue, hopefully, and really make sure that the common enemy is defeated. All right, Bruce, thank you so much for today.
Anytime.
Well, a rainy and gloomy day to kick off the new work week here in the nation's capital. I wonder what the weather is going to be like this week. Jihan, it's been an extremely warm December so far in this country. I'm starting to get a little worried. Is it because of global warming, maybe?
Well, that could be one reason, but you know what, Kang-young? We'll notice a big drop in temperatures this week, which I'll talk about it shortly. It was a murky Monday, but expect the precipitation to let up by early tomorrow morning before things brighten up by the afternoon. But despite the sunshine and relatively mild temperatures, it will feel chillier than the actual temperatures as cold northwesterly winds are expected to move in. So there's also a chance that it could trigger toxic smog from China, so the air quality will be poor for the western parts of the peninsula at times tomorrow. So be sure to check the levels before heading out if you're in the western regions. On that note, let's move on to tomorrow's temperatures. Checking on the lows first. Here in the capital, we'll kick off at 3, while Daegu and Daejeon will start out the day at 7 and 8, and Busan and Jeju Island will kick off at 10 tomorrow morning. And afternoon highs days will be similar to today, as the daily high here in the capital will rise to 7, 10 for Daegu and Gwangju, and Busan and Jeju Island will see a high of 14 and 11 respectively. Now things will get much cooler starting Wednesday, and lows will be plummeting to -6 at the end of the week. So you might want to get ready for another chilly days and be sure to bundle up. And before I go, good news for those traveling on the Seoul Bridge. The West Pyeongtaek and Songak interchanges that have been closed since December 4th will reopen earlier than expected this Saturday, the 19th, thanks to the unusually mild weather we had recently. So keep this in mind, and I'll be sure to keep you updated if there's any changes. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that is our broadcast on this Monday night. I'm Moon Gun-young. Thanks everyone for watching, and we hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow on NewsCenter.